It is 9:30 at Athens. That would make it 9:30 in Kiev and 10:30 in Moscow. And here's my morning update for Thursday morning. And let's see, we have some big news. I think everyone knows what the big news is. But first we have the other big news, which is the death of Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State, the architect of countless wars, including the war in Yugoslavia, the bombing of Serbia. And she also made that terrible comment about the Iraq children on 60 Minutes, where I believe Leslie Stahl asked her, what do you make of the 500,000 children in Iraq that have died? And Albright was like, it was worth it. I mean, we all know the clip. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into Albright, to be honest. I think everyone that watches this channel understands my view on Albright and the things that she did. It's in God's hands now, I guess. So we'll leave it there. But I will use the passing away of Albright as a launch pad to talk about what could be the passing away of the collective West financial architecture and financial system. And that takes us to the first story, which is the really big news, which is Putin's announcement yesterday that from now on, Russia will be accepting gas payments from unfriendly countries. He said unfriendly countries in rubles. Gas payments from unfriendly countries in rubles. And I don't think I need to get into too much detail or analysis to explain to everyone what this means. The fact that these payments will not be made in euros and specifically in dollars is huge. It's huge because Russia is the biggest, if not one of the biggest, if not the biggest supplier of gas and oil and energy and natural resources and commodities and all these things, which I'm positive this payment in rubles for gas will carry over to oil and fertilizer and wheat and everything else. So metals, you name it. Once again, from unfriendly countries. This is a huge deal. It is a huge deal. And this is the first big retaliation we have seen from Russia towards the collective West after the collective West threw everything at Russia with regards to sanctions, everything. From going after the central bank to the stealing of Russia's reserves, the banning of SWIFT, you name it. Outside of Russia's actions where their symmetrical actions that they took with regards to airspace, i.e. when the EU banned Russian planes from traveling to EU countries, Russia retaliated by banning EU airlines from flying over Russia. Outside of that, this is the first real retaliation that we've seen from Russia. Russia put like Hillary Clinton and Hunter Biden and Joe Biden on a sanctions list. Okay, they were trolling. They were trolling the collective West there. Absolutely trolling the collective West, but this is the real deal. I mean, this is big. This is very big. And it's just going to accelerate the end of the Western financial architecture, i.e. the USD as reserve currency. We all know about, Saudi Arabia not taking Biden's phone calls and working with China to settle payments in RMB. Qatar wasn't talking to Biden. UAE wasn't talking to Biden. Venezuela, Iran, all of these countries are obviously moving away from the dollar. India is making purchases. I believe they made 3 million barrels of oil they purchased from Russia, and they're working on payments via rupee. So this is big news. But the way Vladimir Putin phrases it, to unfriendly countries, because that the friendly countries, India, China, the countries which is really all the countries outside of the EU and North America, all the other countries, I'm sure that Russia's going to work with them to settle the payments for energy and other resources and commodities. They're going to settle it in flexible ways with flexible terms, i.e. With China, it'll be with rubles renminbi and rupee rubles with India, and they're going to work with friendly countries to get their energy and their resources to those countries. But when it comes to unfriendly countries, well, rubles. So Germany and the entire EU now is going to be scrambling to figure out a way to get rubles and to pay for everything in rubles and to prop up the ruble and to strengthen the ruble. The ruble didn't have a crash like the Sullivans and the Psaki's were predicting from the Biden White House. It didn't crash. We didn't get regime change in Russia. I mean, it crashed, but it bounced back fairly quickly because Nabiullina, the central bank head, she raised interest rates 20%. So the ruble bounced back. It went from like 140 to like 118, 117, and now it's gaining even more strength. And, in 6 months, when all the contracts start to take effect and this new policy that Putin has announced really starts to bite, the ruble's going to start to strengthen even more, I imagine. But, we're going to see exactly how all of this plays out. And we don't know the exact terms of what's going to happen with regards energy for rubles. Is it going to be new contracts with unfriendly nations? Is it going to be the contracts that wind down? Is this going to carry over to existing contracts, long-term contracts? We don't know yet. But we'll figure it out over the next month or two. But wow, what big news this was. What a miscalculation. What a monumental F-up from the Biden White House. For what? For regime change in Russia and eventual regime change in China, because they're fixated on this regime change myth, this regime change dream that they have. They're going to destroy their own financial architecture, their own countries. They're going to make their own countries poor in order to satisfy this fetish, which is never going to happen. It's not going to happen. So that was really, really big news. Look, Biden's on his way to Brussels and to Poland, and Brussels is going to figure out what to do with regards to Ukraine, but really with regards to Russia and now China, because NATO and the EU have China in their sights as well. So they're going to sit down and they're going to say, how do we escalate? Given the fact that they've thrown all the sanctions they could at Russia, I don't know how they escalate. Outside of just escalating the war in Ukraine. But we'll see. We'll see what they do. Sweden and Germany, they sent 7,000 anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. So those missiles are either going to be obliterated as they cross over the border, they're either going to be sold on the black market, or they're going to end up in the hands of the Russian army and the Donbass militia. But Sweden and Germany felt like they had to virtue signal to the Biden White House before he arrived in Brussels and in Europe for these meetings. Here's an interesting, and let me pull out my phone for this. Here's an interesting article that CNN is putting out. This is really interesting. Let me pull this up here. So CNN is starting to prepare the CNN viewer for the eventual collapse in the East. And so they said this. CNN predicts what the next week will bring with regards to Ukraine and the Ukraine conflict. And here are the first two bullet points. The Russian army, the Russian armed forces, can intensify the bombing. There is a high probability that air attacks will intensify. While attention, and when they mean the bombing, they mean Kiev, intensify the bombing in and around Kiev, and because that's all the Western mainstream media is focused on is Kiev, and Russia is not focused on Kiev. They just kind of encircled it, and they're saying, "Stay put, you're encircled. Now let us work on the east." But the Western mainstream media is fixated on the siege of Kiev, which just doesn't happen because Russia doesn't want it to happen. So anyway, the first bullet point was that Russia's going to most likely increase the bombing and the campaigns in these cities, right? The second point says, while attention is focused on Kiev, Not attention from the Russian military, mind you. Attention from the mainstream media. This is how arrogant and how stupid these people are. While attention is focused on Kiev, the Russian armed forces may try to encircle the forces of the armed forces of Ukraine in the east. They're preparing. They're preparing everybody for what's about to happen in the east. They're preparing everyone for the collapse. So one day people are going to say, how did that happen so quickly? Because the narrative they're going to be fed is all of a sudden, within a day or two, Russia encircled the armed forces in the east, they defeated the armies, and the Ukraine military has collapsed. Because for the past 3-4 weeks, the narrative has been Russia's encircling Kiev, the army has stalled, they can't enter the city because the Kiev military is demolishing tanks with broomsticks and with bubble gum. And Zelensky is the brave warrior in Kiev who's leading the army. He's sitting in his offices in downtown Kiev, and he's preventing the Russians from entering the city. And that's the narrative we've gotten for the past 4 weeks. They've completely ignored the East. Completely ignored the East. With exception, Mariupol recently, and the reason they bring up Mariupol is because the fighting is brutal, it's intense, and there is it's a terrible tragedy there. So they talk about Mariupol because it paints Russia in a certain light. And so, okay, we understand it. It's the propaganda of war, the media propaganda of war. So I thought that was really interesting from CNN. They're obviously preparing everybody for what's about to happen. Let's see, on the diplomatic front, we had two bits of news. The Chinese, this has to do with China. And if the U.S. was thinking that all of their threats to China and their recent sanctions on Chinese officials would force China to ditch Russia, boy, are they wrong. The first bit of news is that at a UN Security Council meeting, the Russian delegate put forth a resolution to basically just a resolution about the humanitarian corridors, things like this, about condemning the what's going on, the humanitarian corridors, i.e. the killing of civilians at various humanitarian corridors. In order to, he put a resolution to implement more humanitarian corridors, just all of these things with regards to Ukraine. And the Security Council shot down the resolution from Russia, except for one member. You guessed it, China. China supported Russia's resolution. They didn't abstain. They voted yes for Russia's resolution. Big news. The second bit of news with regards to China is that, remember yesterday I talked about how Jake Sullivan was trying to push the idea of removing Russia from the G20. Well, China came out with a statement, and I'm going to read you the statement. And this is what the Chinese said with regards to this G20 idea from Jake Sullivan. Let's see, the statement was made by the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman, Wang Weibing, quote, "No member has the right to exclude another country from the membership of the G20. That's what China said. So China's not going to allow Russia to be taken out of the G20 either. So you can see that the calculus to drive China away from Russia, to drive a wedge between China and Russia, especially with these new sanctions and the sanction escalator, is failing. It's failing in a big, big way. So we had that bit of news. What else do I want to talk about? Okay, a lot of people are talking about Anatoly Chubais and the fact that he left the government. Real quickly, this guy was, he did help Putin up through the ranks when Putin was in the 90s, when Putin was still, he was an administrator. He was, working for the mayor in St. Petersburg. Before that, he had a desk job, pretty much an administrator in the Secret Service. But as he was moving up through the ranks, this guy Chubais saw Putin as a liberal type of leader, and he helped him move up through the ranks. And this guy Chubais, who is very Western-oriented, he has left the government. He said he just can't support Putin's actions in Ukraine, and he is resigning. And there are photos of him in Turkey, actually, now, where he's in Turkey. So he took a plane and he bolted to Turkey because he's not going to be missed. The Russians do not like the guy because he represents all the ugly things of the 1990s. What's interesting about Chubais, though, and the 1990s were a terrible time for Russia, a lot of corruption, a lot of theft, and a lot of carpetbaggers from the West were in Russia, and they were plundering the country. They were taking all the resources. But Chubais, he's not going to be missed. But the interesting thing about him is that the fact that he supported Putin moving up through the ranks because he thought Putin was a Western-oriented, liberal type of leader is very telling. It shows that that Putin in his younger days was eager to work with the West. He did want Russia to integrate into the Western system and the Western architecture. But every time he wanted to work with the West, whether it was on a financial level or even with NATO, he would get the door slammed in his face. And over the years, obviously Putin has adapted his position, and he's changed his stance, and we are where we are. So this Chubais guy, he also had like a very a meaningless role in the government. He was like, Putin like appointed him as some sort of climate official, sustainable energy official, something like that for climate change, and he was like a special Kremlin official. And the only reason that Putin had him in the government was out of a sense of loyalty. But he is not a liked person at all. You know, the Russians, these sanctions are doing one thing. They are removing the Western influence from Russia once and for all. Russia banned Google News yesterday. You have the banning of Facebook, of Instagram. You have guys like Chubais who are leaving Russia as well. So all the NGOs, the Soros types, all these people now are gone. They've either left or they're on their way out. So I mean, it's whatever friendly, Western-friendly, liberal presence in Russia, that was in Russia, that the West could use in order to promote their agenda has all gone. It's all leaving. I mean, these sanctions, they've had the exact reverse effect of regime change. If anything, now you're going to have more. You're going to have a more homogeneous type of government structure and administration than what you had before. I mean, all the liberal influence, all of the Western influence is gone now, whether it's on an NGO level, on a corporate level, even on a government administrative level. And there are a lot of Western-friendly officials in the Russian government. There always has been. But they're all bolting now. They're all leaving. It's just incredible news. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to get to you guys. Any other news? Oh, Russia expelled U.S. diplomats. Tit for tat. Because as the U.S. is expelling Russian diplomats, the Russian embassy and the American embassy in Moscow, they've had diplomats expelled as well. They've been designated persona non grata. So I think like the U.S. embassy at one time was hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people in Moscow, and now it's like whittled down to like 50 people. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable, the decoupling that we're seeing. I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else that I want to get to everybody. I mean, obviously the big news was the rubles, the gas for rubles. But remember, to unfriendly nations. You know, there was a time when Russia was calling the EU and the US, they would call them partners in their statements, no matter what the EU did to Russia, no matter what they did. Sanctions, regime change, color revolutions, whatever they would do to Russia, Russia would always come out with a statement saying, our partners in the West, our partners in the West. Now it's changed to unfriendly countries. Oh boy, we're in for some very, very rough times, everybody. We're seeing history made, but boy, are we in for some very, very rough times ahead. All right, I think I will leave this update right there. And the Duran.locals.com. Check out Alexander's channel. He gets into depth with regards to the gas for rubles story as well. He goes into a much deeper analysis than I've gone into. But definitely check out his channel. And of course, the Duran, our main channel. Check it out. And I'm going to walk down these steps right here. Grab a coffee. Get this video up. Right now I'm in an area in the downtown of Athens called Kolonaki. It's supposedly the super nice area. Like it's like the real ritzy part of Greece. You know, the who's who lives here. But there's still graffiti. There is still graffiti. So anyway, all right, everybody, take care.